The day I realized my son had sold my late husband's Patek Philippe was the day something inside me broke. That watch wasn't just expensive. It was the last thing David gave me before cancer took him. He held my hand in that hospital room and told me, Karen, keep this safe. It carries our time together. So when I opened my safe one quiet Tuesday morning and saw the velvet box sitting there, empty, my heart dropped. 2 hours later, my pawnshop manager called. A rare Patek Philippe had just been sold. And the people who sold it? My son Ryan and his wife Ashley. What they didn't know was that the pawn shop they walked into that morning belonged to me. Before I tell you what happened next, take a second to hit ***, if you believe family betrayal cuts deeper than anything else. And if you're new here, consider subscribing. I share real stories about the complicated truths behind family, money, and loyalty. But first, I'm curious. If someone in your family sold something that carried your loved one's memory, how would you react? Tell me in the comments. And let me know, where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing how far these stories travel, because what happened after that phone call changed my family forever. The truth is, the watch was never just a watch. To anyone else, it was a rare Patek Philippe a beautiful piece of craftsmanship worth tens of thousands of dollars. But to me, it carried 35 years of memories of a life I had built with my husband. David Martinez, David and I met when we were both in our 20s, long before either of us had any money. I was working the front counter at a small jewelry repair shop in San Diego, and he was delivering supplies for a watch distributor. He had this quiet confidence about him, never loud, never arrogant, but steady in a way that made you feel safe. The first time we talked, he brought in a broken wristwatch that belonged to his father. He said, "I'm hoping someone here can fix it." I told him we mostly repaired jewelry, but I'd take a look anyway. The watch was old, scratched, and far from valuable. But when I handed it back to him after replacing the tiny spring inside, the way he smiled made it feel like I had just returned something priceless. That was the first moment our lives crossed paths. We married 3 years later. Back then, we had nothing. Our first apartment was so small that the kitchen table doubled as David's workspace when he started learning watch repairs in the evenings. Money was tight. There were months when we counted every dollar just to make rent. But David had patience and vision. He used to say something that stayed with me all these years. Time is the only thing people can't replace. That's why watches matter. Over the years, his skills grew. What started as a hobby turned into a business repairing and restoring high-end watches. Eventually, we opened a small store together. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. I handled the customers and the books. David handled the watches. For decades, we worked side by side. Then something unexpected happened. Customers began bringing in not just watches to repair, but items they wanted to sell quickly. Jewelry, antiques, collectibles. Some people needed fast cash. Others simply didn't know the value of what they owned. David realized there was an opportunity there. That idea eventually became the foundation for something much bigger. Our first pawn shop opened when I was 42. We ran it carefully, focusing on rare and high-quality pieces. David insisted we treat every customer with respect, no matter what they were selling or why. Over time, the business expanded. One shop became two became 5. By the time David turned 60, we owned a small chain of luxury pawn shops across Southern California, But very few people outside the business world knew that, and certainly not most of our family. David always believed money complicated relationships. He would say, "Karen, the more people know what you have, the more they start seeing you differently." So we kept things quiet. Even our son, Ryan grew up thinking we were simply comfortable, not wealthy. And for most of his life, Ryan was exactly the kind of son any parent would be proud of. He was kind, responsible, hardworking. When he was a teenager, he used to come to the store after school and sit at the workbench beside David, watching him carefully open watch cases and examine the tiny gears inside. David loved those moments. I remember one evening when Ryan was about 16. The store had closed and the three of us were sitting in the back office. David held up a watch he had just finished repairing and said to Ryan, "A watch tells more than time. It tells the story of the person who wore it." Ryan asked how. David smiled and pointed to the tiny scratches on the metal. "Every mark means something happened while it was on someone's wrist. Life leaves traces." Ryan nodded like he understood. Back then, I believed he really did. Years passed. Ryan went to college, studied business, graduated with good grades. David was proud of him. But everything began to change after Ryan met Ashley Carter. Ashley was beautiful, confident, charming in a way that made people instantly like her. At first, I thought she was wonderful. But over time, small things started to bother me. Ashley had a very different relationship with money than we did. Where David and I had built everything slowly, Ashley seemed to believe success meant living as extravagantly as possible. She loved designer brands, luxury vacations, expensive restaurants. Ryan didn't seem bothered by it. In fact, he started adopting the same lifestyle. At first, David and I assumed it was just the excitement of being young. Then the requests for financial help began. Just a small loan for a down payment, temporary help with a business investment, support while Ryan changed jobs. Each time David and I helped them, not because we had to, because they were our family. David used to say, "If we can make their lives easier, why wouldn't we?" Looking back now, I wonder if that generosity planted the seeds of what happened later. Because little by little, Ryan and Ashley stopped seeing our help as kindness. They started seeing it as expectation. Then came the year everything changed. David got sick. At first it was just fatigue, then tests, then more tests. Finally, the diagnosis none of us were prepared for: cancer. The months that followed were the hardest of my life. David fought bravely. Ryan visited often in the beginning. Ashley came sometimes, though she always seemed uncomfortable around hospitals. During those months, David spent less time talking about business and more time talking about memories, about our life together, about Ryan, about time. One evening, a few weeks before he passed, he asked me to bring a small wooden box from the bedroom. Inside was the Patek Philippe ***. It was the most expensive watch he had ever owned. David had bought it years earlier to celebrate the 10th anniversary of our business. He handed it to me. His hands were weak, but his voice was steady. "Karen," he said quietly, "this watch represents everything we built together." I tried to protest. "David, you should keep it. It's yours." He shook his head. "No, I want you to have it." Then he said something I will never forget. "Protect it. Not because of the money, because it carries our time." A few weeks later, David was gone. The house felt unbearably quiet after that. Grief changes time in strange ways. Some days move slowly. Others disappear completely. But one thing I never forgot was David's request. The Patek Philippe stayed in a *** velvet-lined box inside the safe in my bedroom closet. ***. I rarely took it out. Not because I didn't want to see it. Because every time I did, it reminded me how much I missed him. Years passed. Ryan and Ashley visited occasionally, though their lives seemed increasingly busy. New car. New apartment. New vacations. I didn't question it too much. Until the morning, I opened my safe and saw the empty box. At first, I thought I must have moved the watch somewhere else. But deep down, a terrible feeling began to grow inside me. The kind of feeling that tells you something is very, very wrong. And then my phone rang. It was *** Daniel Brooks ***, the manager of one of my pawn shops. His voice sounded calm, professional. "Karen," he said, "we just had a very interesting piece come through the store." I asked what it was. There was a short pause. "A Patek Philippe." My heart skipped. Daniel continued. "It's an extremely rare model. Looks like it's been in a family for a long time." My stomach dropped. I asked him one simple question. "Who brought it in?" Daniel hesitated for a moment. Then he said the names that made the room spin around me. Ryan Martinez and his wife Ashley. In that moment, I felt something inside me break. But what they didn't know was that the pawn shop they had just walked into belonged to me. For a long moment after Daniel said their names, I couldn't speak. I just stood there in the quiet hallway outside my bedroom phone, pressed against my ear, staring at the open safe in front of me. The velvet box sat inside like a small accusation. "Empty." Daniel's voice came again, cautious this time. "Karen, are you still there? Yes, I finally said, though my voice felt distant like it belonged to someone else. I'm here. He hesitated. Daniel had worked for me for nearly 12 years. He knew my voice well enough to recognize when something wasn't right. You want me to hold the item? He asked carefully. I closed my eyes for a second. In the business, that was a simple question with a simple meaning. If a manager suspected an item might belong to someone else or had some kind of complicated history, they would hold the transaction until the owner reviewed it. All I had to do was say yes. Daniel would politely stall Ryan and Ashley. The watch would never leave the counter. But something stopped me. Instead, I asked quietly, "Are they still there?" "Yes," he said. "They're talking with Jenna at the appraisal desk." Jenna was one of our newer employees, smart, polite, and very thorough when it came to evaluating luxury items. "Okay," I said slowly. "I'm going to log into the security system." Every one of our stores had live camera feeds accessible through a secure app. It was one of the ways I kept track of things without having to be physically present all the time. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the app. Within seconds, the main floor of the store appeared on my screen. And there they were. Ryan stood beside the counter, leaning forward slightly, hands resting on the glass display case. Ashley stood next to him, her arms folded loosely, scanning the room with mild curiosity. They looked relaxed, normal, like they were running an everyday errand, not like two people who had just taken something irreplaceable from my home. I switched to the camera above the appraisal desk. The Patek Philippe sat in front of Jenna, resting on a small black cloth under bright inspection lights. Even through the camera, I recognized it instantly. The slim silver case, the deep blue dial, the tiny scratch near the clasp from the time David had accidentally brushed it against a metal toolbox 20 years earlier. My chest tightened. Jenna carefully turned the watch over, examining the back through a magnifying loupe. Ashley leaned closer, so she said casually, "What do you think it's worth?" Jenna smiled politely. "It's definitely a beautiful piece. Patek Philippe watches are extremely collectible, especially older models like this." Ryan nodded as if he already knew that. "We figured it might be worth something," he said. Something. The word stung. Jenna continued examining the watch, checking the serial number and condition. Ashley glanced around the store again, clearly growing impatient. "I mean, it's been sitting in a drawer forever," she said with a small shrug. "Might as well turn it into something useful." I felt my fingers tighten around the phone. "Something useful?" Ryan gave a small laugh. "Yeah, my mom gets weirdly sentimental about stuff like that. Weirdly sentimental." I leaned against the wall, suddenly needing the support. Jenna looked up briefly. "Is the watch yours originally?" Ryan shook his head. "It was my dad's." For a moment, his voice softened. But then Ashley spoke again, breezy as ever. "He never wore it much anyway," she said. "Honestly, it's wasted sitting in a safe." Ryan nodded. "Exactly." There was a brief pause while Jenna typed some information into the computer. Then she said, "Based on the condition and the model, we could offer around $80,000. Ryan's eyebrows shot up. 80? Ashley's eyes widened. Oh my God. They looked at each other with the kind of excitement people usually reserved for winning a lottery ticket. Ryan tried to play it cool, but his grin betrayed him. "That's actually more than we expected." Ashley laughed softly. "Well, that pays for half the trip right there." Trip. The word echoed in my mind. Jenna tilted her head slightly. Trip. Ashley didn't seem to mind explaining. "We're planning a European vacation," she said proudly. 3 weeks. Ryan leaned back slightly, warming to the topic. "Paris, Amalfi Coast, Santorini." Ashley clasped her hands together. "I've always wanted to stay in one of those cliffside hotels in Greece." Ryan chuckled. "And now we can..." They both looked at the watch again. The watch David had asked me to protect. The watch that carried the memory of 35 years of our life together, and they were turning it into a vacation. I swallowed hard. Daniel's voice came through my phone again quietly. "Karen, should we stop the transaction?" I watched the screen. Ryan and Ashley were still smiling, still talking about restaurants and hotels, about champagne on balconies overlooking the Mediterranean. For a moment, I imagined walking into the store right then, confronting them, taking the watch back. But something deeper told me to wait, because what I was seeing wasn't just a mistake. It was a glimpse into how they truly saw things. And maybe, just maybe, I needed to understand that fully before I decided what to do next. So instead, I said something that surprised even myself. "No." Daniel paused. "No." I took a slow breath. "Let the sale go through." There was silence on the line for a moment. Then Daniel said quietly, All right. On the camera, Jenna began preparing the paperwork. Ryan pulled out his driver's license. Ashley looked practically giddy. "I can't believe this is actually happening," she whispered. Ryan grinned. "Best decision we've made in a while." My chest ached, but my voice stayed calm. "Daniel," I said softly after the transaction is complete, "move the watch to the secure vault." Another pause. Then Daniel answered. "Understood." He knew exactly what that meant. The watch wouldn't be displayed. It wouldn't be resold. It would stay exactly where I wanted it. Safe, just like David had asked. I watched the rest of the transaction unfold through the camera. Jenna counted the cash. Ryan signed the receipt. Ashley slipped her arm through his. And a few minutes later, they walked out of the store together, smiling like they had just pulled off the deal of a lifetime. What they didn't realize was that their decision had just started something far bigger than a vacation. Because from that moment forward, I began to see my son and his wife in a way I never had before. And once you truly see something, you can't pretend you didn't. After Ryan and Ashley walked out of the pawn shop, I didn't move for a long time. I remained standing in the hallway with the phone still in my hand, staring at the camera feed on my screen. The shop floor was calm again. Customers browsed quietly. Jenna returned to organizing the display case like nothing unusual had happened. But to me, everything felt different, because a line had been crossed. Daniel spoke gently on the phone. "Karen, the transaction is complete." I nodded automatically before realizing he couldn't see me. "All right," I said. My voice sounded steadier now. "Put the watch in the secure vault like we discussed." "Already done," he replied. I knew that vault well. Every store had one, a reinforced steel compartment used for extremely valuable items. Jewelry worth hundreds of thousands of dollars had been stored there before, but none of those pieces had ever meant anything to me personally. This one did. I ended the call and slowly walked back into my bedroom. The safe door was still open. The velvet box still sat inside it, empty. I picked it up, carefully running my fingers along the soft lining where the watch had rested for years. Memories flooded back instantly. David fastening the watch on his wrist before opening the store each morning. David adjusting the strap at our 20th anniversary dinner. David laughing one afternoon when Ryan, still a teenager, tried the watch on and complained it felt too heavy. "It's supposed to feel heavy," David had said with a smile. "That's the weight of time." Back then, the moment had seemed small and ordinary. Now it felt like something sacred that had been broken. I closed the velvet box and placed it back in the safe. Then I shut the door. For the rest of the afternoon, I tried to focus on work. Emails, invoices, routine calls with managers from the other stores. But my mind kept drifting back to the footage. Ryan's voice, Ashley's laugh. The casual way they talked about the watch like it was just another item they could turn into spending money. By evening, I realized something important. I didn't just want to react emotionally. I needed to understand how things had reached this point. Because somewhere along the way, my son had stopped seeing the watch as a symbol of his father and started seeing it as an asset. So that night, I sat down at my office desk and opened the laptop. Ryan and Ashley were active on social media, especially Ashley. Within minutes, I found her page. The most recent post had been uploaded only 2 hours earlier. A photo of 2 glasses of champagne sitting on a restaurant table. The caption read, *, celebrating a little unexpected cash today. Europe, here we come, *. My chest tightened. There were dozens of comments already. Friends congratulating them. People asking where they were going. Ashley had happily responded to several. * Paris first, then Amalfi Coast. * 3 weeks of pure sunshine. Ryan had commented beneath the post with a plane emoji and a laughing face. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I scrolled further. Ashley had already begun posting travel plans. Pictures of hotels, restaurants, private boat tours along the Italian coast. Everything expensive, everything glamorous. Everything funded by the watch David had asked me to protect. For a brief second, anger surged through me. But just as quickly, it settled into something colder. Clarity. Because if there's one thing decades of running pawn shops had taught me, it's this. People reveal their true priorities when money enters the equation. And right now, Ryan and Ashley were revealing theirs very clearly. The next morning, I drove to the store where the watch had been sold. Daniel greeted me at the door. He was tall, calm, and professional, the kind of manager who rarely made mistakes. But today his expression carried a hint of concern. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I offered a small smile. "I will be. He nodded, understanding that there were questions he shouldn't ask. We walked to the back office together. After closing the door, Daniel opened the secure vault. Inside were several trays holding high-value items. He lifted one tray carefully, and there it was, David's Patek Philippe. The silver case reflected the soft overhead lights. The deep blue dial looked just as elegant as it always had. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Daniel placed the tray on the desk. "Do you want to take it home?" he asked. I considered the question. Part of me wanted to put the watch back in the safe immediately, but another part of me knew something important. The moment Ryan and Ashley had sold it, the watch had stopped being just a memory. Now it had become evidence. Evidence of something I wasn't fully ready to confront yet. So I shook my head slowly. "No," I said. "Keep it here." Daniel raised an eyebrow slightly. "Here?" "Yes." He didn't question it. "All right." I looked at the watch again. Then I said something that made Daniel pause. "If Ryan or Ashley come back asking about it..." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Yes." "Don't tell them anything about me." His brow furrowed. "You mean they don't know?" "No," I said calmly. "They have no idea I own the store." That wasn't unusual. Most customers had no idea who owned the pawn shops they visited. But in this case, the secrecy carried a different weight. Daniel nodded slowly. "Understood." We placed the watch back in the vault. Then we closed the heavy steel door. As the lock clicked shut, I felt something settle inside me. Because now the situation had changed. Ryan and Ashley believed they had sold the watch and walked away with $80,000. They believed the story was over. But the truth was, the story had only just begun, and I intended to watch very carefully what they did next. Because sometimes the best way to understand someone's character is to let them believe no one is watching. Over the next few days, I tried to return to my normal routine. But normal didn't exist anymore. Once you witness something like that, your own son casually selling the most meaningful object his father ever owned, you can't simply push it aside and continue life as usual. Still, I kept my emotions under control. Years of running businesses had taught me that reacting too quickly often led to mistakes. The best decisions usually came after watching, carefully gathering information and understanding the full picture. So that's what I did. I watched. Ashley's social media became my window into their plans. Within 3 days, the trip had grown even bigger than I expected. What started as a European vacation quickly turned into something far more extravagant. Ashley posted photos of a luxury hotel in Paris, 5 stars balconies overlooking the Seine. Another post showed a private boat charter along the Amalfi coast. Then there was a screenshot of a reservation confirmation for a cliffside resort in Santorini. Each post came with cheerful captions. Asterisk. Life is too short not to travel. Asterisk. Asterisk. Invest in experiences, not things. Asterisk. That last one made my jaw tighten, because the thing they had traded for those experiences had been David's watch. Ryan appeared in many of the photos Ashley shared, smiling, relaxed, clearly excited. Not once did he look conflicted. Not once did he seem hesitant about what they had done. And that realization hurt more than I expected, because deep down a small part of me had hoped that maybe Ashley had pushed him into it, that maybe Ryan had simply gone along with something he wasn't entirely comfortable with. But the more I watched, the clearer it became. Ryan had been an equal partner in the decision. 3 days after the sale, Daniel called me again. "They came back," he said. I immediately sat up straighter. "When?" "About an hour ago." "Why?" Daniel chuckled quietly. "They wanted to sell something else." I felt a cold sensation spread through my chest. What was it? An old gold bracelet. For a moment, my mind raced through possibilities. Then I realized what bracelet he meant. It had belonged to David's mother. She had given it to Ryan when he graduated college. "Did you buy it?" I asked. "No," Daniel said. "The condition wasn't great and the gold content was low. We offered a small amount, but they decided to keep it." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. That bracelet hadn't meant nearly as much as the watch. But the fact that they were already looking for other things to sell told me something important. The watch hadn't been a one-time lapse in judgment. It had opened a door, and now they were checking what else might be worth turning into cash. "Did they ask about the watch?" I asked. "Yes." My heart skipped slightly. "What did you say?" "Exactly what you told me to," Daniel replied calmly, "that the item had already been processed and placed in storage." I nodded slowly. "Good." There was a brief silence. Then Daniel added, "Karen, they didn't seem bothered." "What do you mean?" "I mean, they didn't act like they regretted selling it." "Of course they didn't. because as far as they were concerned, the watch had already served its purpose. It had turned into $80,000. And $80,000 had turned into the vacation Ashley had always wanted. After hanging up with Daniel, I sat quietly for several minutes. Then I opened my laptop again. Ashley had posted a new photo. This one showed 2 airline tickets. Business class, Los Angeles to Paris. Departure 3 days from now. The caption read, *Europe adventure begins soon. Couldn't be more excited. *. The comments underneath were full of enthusiasm. Friends wishing them safe travels. People asking for travel tips. Ryan had commented again with a simple message. *best trip we've ever planned. *. I closed the laptop slowly. For the first time since discovering the watch was gone, a strange calm settled over me. Not forgiveness, not acceptance, just clarity. Because watching Ryan and Ashley celebrate their decision made something very obvious. They believed the story was finished. They thought they had sold the watch. They thought they had outsmarted the situation. And they thought I would never know. That belief was exactly what I needed. Because sometimes the most powerful moment in any story isn't the mistake itself. It's the moment when the people who made the mistake believe they got away with it. 2 days later, Ryan called me. His voice sounded cheerful. "Hey, Mom." I forced warmth into my voice. "Hi, sweetheart. We're heading to Europe tomorrow," he said. "Ashley thought we should call before we leave." That sentence alone told me a lot. Ashley thought we should call, meaning the idea probably hadn't been Ryan's. "That sounds exciting," I said calmly. "It is," Ryan replied. "We've been planning this for a while." Planning. Another interesting word choice. I wondered if he realized how carefully he was avoiding mentioning the watch. "How long will you be gone?" I asked. "About 3 weeks." 3 weeks? 3 weeks of champagne beaches and expensive dinners, all funded by David's memory. "Well," I said gently, "I hope you both enjoy yourselves." "Thanks, Mom." There was a brief pause. Then Ryan added, "We'll bring you something back." A souvenir. I nearly laughed. Instead, I simply said, "That's thoughtful." After we hung up, I sat quietly in the living room. The house was silent except for the ticking of the wall clock. Tick, tick, tick. For a moment, I imagined David sitting across from me in his favorite chair. He would have listened to everything carefully before saying anything. Then he probably would have asked a simple question. "What do you want to do about it?" And that was the question I had been thinking about since the moment Daniel said Ryan's name. What did I want to do? Did I want revenge? Did I want confrontation? Did I want to simply take the watch back and pretend none of this had happened? None of those options felt right. Because the truth was, Ryan and Ashley still didn't understand what they had done. They didn't understand the meaning behind that watch. And until they understood that nothing would truly change. 3 weeks later, when they returned from Europe, they would believe they had enjoyed the perfect vacation. They would believe life was continuing normally. They would believe their secret had remained hidden. And that was exactly when I planned to reveal something they never expected. Because sometimes the most powerful lessons in life come when people finally realize the truth they thought would stay buried forever. The morning Ryan and Ashley left for Europe, I woke up earlier than usual. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes just before sunrise. For years, David had been the one who woke first, always heading to the kitchen to make coffee before the day began. Even after all this time, sometimes I still expected to hear the soft sound of the kettle or the familiar rhythm of his footsteps. But that morning, the silence felt different. Not sad. Focused. Because while Ryan and Ashley were packing suitcases and boarding a plane, I had already begun preparing something else. Not revenge. A lesson. I made my coffee and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. Ashley had posted one final message before leaving the airport. A picture of their passports, their boarding passes, and 2 glasses of champagne in the airline lounge. The caption read, *Goodbye California. Hello Europe, *. Ryan appeared beside her in the photo, smiling widely. Friends and followers flooded the comments with excitement. Have the best time, *. You two deserve this, *. I studied Ryan's face in the photo. He looked happy, carefree, like a man who believed everything in his life was moving exactly as planned. For a moment, I wondered if David would have handled things differently than I was about to. David had always been the softer one between us. More patient, more forgiving. But David had also believed deeply in responsibility. He often told Ryan something that stayed with me. Every decision has a cost. The sooner you understand that, the stronger you'll become. Right now, Ryan hadn't paid any cost for his decision. He had taken something sacred from his father, sold it, turned it into plane tickets and hotel reservations, and then walked away smiling. But life has a way of balancing those scales eventually. And sometimes, a parent has to help that balance happen. After finishing my coffee, I drove to the pawn shop again. Daniel was already there unlocking the front doors when I arrived. He looked surprised to see me so early. "Morning, Karen." "Morning." We stepped inside together, the quiet store still dark except for the soft glow of the security lights. Daniel turned on the overhead lamps. "Anything new?" I asked. He shook his head. "No sign of them since the other day." "That's fine," I said. We walked into the back office and Daniel opened the secure vault once more. The Patek Philippe rested exactly where we had left it. Seeing it again brought a strange mixture of emotions. Relief that it was safe, and sadness that it had ever left my home at all. Daniel carefully lifted the tray and placed it on the desk. "Still one of the most beautiful watches I've ever seen," he said. David would have liked that compliment. I reached out and picked up the watch. The metal felt cool in my hands. For a moment, I simply held it, remembering the countless times I had seen it on David's wrist. Time had moved forward since then. But somehow this small object had carried those years with it. I gently turned the watch over, studying the back of the case. There, engraved in small letters, were the words David had added when he first bought it. Asterisk time built together. Asterisk. My throat tightened. Daniel noticed the engraving, too. "That's personal," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied. "Very." I set the watch back down on the tray. Then I looked at Daniel. "Do you remember the paperwork from the transaction?" He nodded. "Of course. I want copies. Already printed," he said. He opened a folder and slid several documents across the desk. The pawn receipt, Ryan's signature, Ashley's signature, the appraisal report, the payment confirmation, everything recorded exactly as it had happened. I studied the receipt carefully. Ryan Martinez, seller. The words looked strange on paper, not because they were wrong, but because they represented something deeper than a simple transaction. They represented a decision, a choice Ryan had made about what his father's memory was worth. I closed the folder. "Keep this safe," I told Daniel. "Of course." There was a moment of silence before he spoke again. "You're planning something." It wasn't a question. I smiled faintly. "Let's just say I'm waiting." "For what?" "For the right moment." Daniel leaned back slightly, thinking. "You're not going to confront them right away." "No." "Why?" I looked at the watch again. "Because right now they still believe they got away with it." Daniel nodded slowly. "And you want them to keep believing that?" "Yes." Years in this business had taught Daniel how people behaved when they thought their actions had no consequences. He understood exactly what I meant. "So what happens next?" he asked. "That depends on them." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "People reveal their character over time," I said. "If this was a mistake, Ryan will feel it eventually. And if it wasn't," I met his eyes, "then I'll know." We locked the watch back inside the vault. As the heavy door shut, I felt the quiet certainty of a plan forming. Not a dramatic plan, not something explosive, but something that would reveal the truth clearly. Ryan and Ashley would spend 3 weeks traveling across Europe. 3 weeks posting photos of beaches, wine sunsets, and luxury hotels. 3 weeks believing their lives were moving forward exactly the way they wanted. But while they were gone, I had something else to consider. Because selling the watch had revealed more than just their priorities. It had forced me to ask a difficult question about the future. What would happen to everything David and I had built? The pawn shops, the investments, the properties, the legacy. For years, I had assumed Ryan would eventually inherit it all. But inheritance wasn't just about blood. It was about trust. And right now, that trust had been cracked. Not destroyed, but cracked. The difference mattered. Because cracks can either spread or be repaired. The only way to know which one would happen was time. And ironically, that time was the one thing that watch represented better than anything else. Ryan had sold his father's watch for a vacation, but he still had no idea that the real value of that watch was a lesson he hadn't learned yet. And when he finally did, everything in his life was going to change. Over the next 3 weeks, Ryan and Ashley traveled across Europe. And like most people who were proud of their lives, they documented nearly every moment of it. At first, I told myself I wouldn't look. But curiosity has a quiet way of winning. So each evening, after finishing work and closing my laptop, I found myself opening Ashley's social media page. Paris was the first stop. The photos showed exactly what you'd expect: cobblestone streets, elegant cafes, and balconies overlooking the Seine. Ashley posted pictures of delicate pastries and champagne glasses held up against the soft glow of the Eiffel Tower at night. Ryan stood beside her in many of the photos. Relaxed, happy, free from the weight of the decision they had made. The caption under one of the photos read, "Living the dream." Hundreds of likes followed. Friends wrote comments like, "couple goals, you two are doing life right, For a moment, I studied Ryan's smile. It was the same smile he had as a boy when he got a new bicycle or scored his first goal in a soccer game. And that realization stirred something complicated inside me. Because despite everything that had happened, he was still my son, the child I had raised. The child David had taught to respect time, work hard, and care about family. Somewhere along the way, something had shifted. But the boy we had raised couldn't have disappeared entirely. At least I hope not. After Paris, they traveled south to Italy. Ashley posted a photo from a balcony in Positano. The sea behind her stretched out in endless blue dotted with white boats. Ryan stood next to her holding a glass of wine. The caption said, "Worth every penny, I stared at those 3 words longer than I probably should have. Worth every penny. The phrase echoed in my mind. Did Ryan believe that? Did he really think the vacation justified what they had done? Or had he simply pushed the thought aside to enjoy the moment? The next few days were filled with more photos. Private boat rides, expensive seafood dinners, sunsets over the Mediterranean. Then came Santorini. Ashley seemed particularly excited about that stop. She posted multiple pictures from their cliffside hotel. One photo showed the famous white buildings cascading down the hillside, glowing under the golden sunset. Another showed Ryan and Ashley sitting at a candle-lit table overlooking the ocean. Ashley captioned it, "This trip changed my life." I wondered if she realized how true that statement might eventually become. One evening during their trip, Daniel called me. "Everything quiet on your end?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Why, just checking in." Daniel had been watching the same social media posts I had. He knew what they were doing. "I assume they're enjoying themselves," he added. "They seem to be." Daniel hesitated before speaking again. "You still planning to wait until they come back?" "Yes. That's going to be an interesting conversation." I let out a small breath. "Yes, it will." The truth was, I had spent those 3 weeks thinking carefully about what that conversation should look like. Anger would accomplish nothing. Neither would shouting or accusations. What Ryan needed wasn't humiliation. What he needed was clarity. And clarity comes from truth. During their second week abroad, something unexpected happened. Ryan called me. It was late afternoon in California, which meant it was early morning where they were. "Hey, Mom," he said. His voice sounded slightly tired but cheerful. "Hi, Ryan," I replied. "How are you?" "I'm good." "We just woke up," he said. "Thought I'd check in." That surprised me. Ryan wasn't always great at staying in touch. "I'm glad you called," I said. "Trip's been amazing," he continued. "You should see this place." "I've seen the photos." He laughed lightly. "Ashley's been posting everything, hasn't she?" "Yes, she has." There was a brief pause. Then Ryan said something that caught my attention. "Dad would have liked this view." The sentence hung in the air for a moment. It was the first time he had mentioned David since the trip began. "What makes you say that?" I asked gently. "He always loved the ocean." "Yes," I said softly, "he did." Another pause followed. Then Ryan shifted the conversation. "Anyway, we're heading to breakfast soon. Just wanted to say hi." "Enjoy the rest of your trip," I told him. "We will." After the call ended, I sat quietly for several minutes. That one sentence kept repeating in my mind. Dad would have liked this view. Did Ryan realize the irony? Did he understand that the view he was admiring had been paid for with his father's watch? Or had he managed to separate the two things completely? That question stayed with me for the rest of their trip. When their final week in Europe began, Ashley's posts started showing signs of exhaustion. Travel has a way of doing that. Luxury or not, constant movement wears people down. The photos were still beautiful, but there was a slight difference. Less excitement. More tired smiles. One evening, Ashley posted a picture of their suitcases sitting by the hotel door. The caption read, "Last night in Europe. What a ride, Ryan commented underneath. "Back home tomorrow, I closed my laptop after reading that. Tomorrow. 3 weeks had passed faster than I expected. Tomorrow, Ryan and Ashley would return to California. They would unpack their bags, share stories with friends, upload the final photos from their trip, and continue believing that the story of the watch had ended the day they walked out of the pawn shop. But the truth was, the real story hadn't started yet, because the moment they stepped back into their normal lives, they were going to discover something they never expected. The watch they thought they had sold, the watch they believed had disappeared into someone else's collection, the watch they traded for champagne and sunsets, was still right here in California, waiting. And so was I. Ryan and Ashley returned from Europe on a quiet Sunday afternoon. I knew exactly when their flight landed because Ashley posted about it almost immediately. A photo of Los Angeles International Airport appeared on her page with the caption, "*back home, already missing the Mediterranean, *." The picture showed Ryan standing beside a luggage cart piled with suitcases. His hair looked a little messy from the long flight, but he was smiling again, the same carefree expression he had worn in nearly every photo from their trip. Friends flooded the comments with questions. "How was Santorini? Did you try the seafood in Amalfi? Tell us everything. Ashley promised to share more photos later. To them, the trip had been a success, a perfect adventure. And as far as they knew, the story of David's watch had ended the moment they left the pawn shop with $80,000 in cash. But while they were exploring Europe, something else had been happening quietly back in California. I had been thinking, not about revenge, not even about confrontation. What I had been thinking about was the future, specifically Ryan's future, because selling the watch had forced me to look at something I had avoided for years, the question of inheritance. For most of Ryan's life, I had assumed that everything David and I built would eventually pass to him. The pawn shops, the properties, the investments, the legacy of decades of work. It seemed natural. Ryan was our only child. But over the past few weeks, I had begun to wonder something uncomfortable. Did Ryan understand what that legacy meant? Or did he simply see it as money waiting to be spent? That difference mattered more than anything. 3 days after they returned from Europe, Ryan called me. "Hey, Mom," he said. "Hi, sweetheart," I replied. "Want to have dinner this week?" he asked. "Ashley and I thought we could tell you about the trip." The invitation sounded casual, almost cheerful, like nothing unusual had happened. I imagined them sitting across from me at a restaurant showing pictures of beaches and hotels, talking about wine tastings and boat rides, and pretending the watch had never existed. "Dinner sounds nice," I said. "How about Thursday?" "Thursday works." "Great," Ryan said. "We'll pick the place." After the call ended, I sat in my office chair and thought about the upcoming dinner. This would be the first time I saw them since the day the watch disappeared. The first time I looked into Ryan's eyes knowing exactly what he had done. Part of me wondered if he would feel guilty, if there would be even the smallest hint of discomfort in his voice or expression. But based on everything I had seen so far, I doubted it. That evening, I drove to the pawn shop again. Daniel was finishing paperwork in the back office when I arrived. "You look like you've been thinking," he said when he saw me. "I have." He leaned back slightly. "They're back from Europe." "Yes." "You planning to talk to them soon?" "Thursday." Daniel nodded slowly. "That should be interesting." I smiled faintly. "Before that happens, there's something I want to do." He waited. "I want to review Ryan's financial situation." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You mean his credit?" "Yes." Over the years, running pawn shops had given me access to plenty of financial tools and records. While I respected people's privacy, there were ways to gather general information when necessary. Daniel pulled up a chair beside the desk and opened his laptop. "What exactly are we looking for?" he asked. "Debt," I said simply. He began typing. Within minutes, the screen filled with numbers, credit card balances, loan accounts, payment histories. As Daniel scrolled through the report, his expression slowly changed. "Well," he said quietly, "that's interesting." "How bad?" He turned the screen toward me. "Worse than I expected." Ryan had accumulated significant credit card debt over the past 2 years. Luxury purchases, travel expenses, high monthly payments, and several personal loans. My stomach tightened as I studied the numbers. Even before the Europe trip, Ryan and Ashley had been living far beyond their means. "Do they have any major assets?" I asked. Daniel checked again. "Car loan." "What kind of car?" "Mercedes." That didn't surprise me. Ashley loved expensive cars. "What about savings?" I asked. Daniel shook his head. Very little. I leaned back in my chair. Suddenly the situation looked different. Selling the watch hadn't just been about funding a vacation. It had been part of a much larger pattern. Ryan and Ashley were maintaining a lifestyle they couldn't actually afford. And when the pressure built high enough, they had turned to the most valuable item within reach. David's watch. Daniel closed the laptop slowly. So the question is, he said, what do you do with this information? I looked toward the secure vault across the room. Behind that steel door sat the watch Ryan believed was gone forever. I tell him the truth, I said. All of it. Yes. Daniel crossed his arms thoughtfully. And if he reacts badly, that's his choice. There was a long pause before Daniel spoke again. You know, he said most parents would just forgive something like this and move on. Maybe. You're doing something different. Yes. He studied my face for a moment. You're testing him. I didn't answer right away, but Daniel already knew the truth. Because that's exactly what I was doing. Ryan had reached a crossroads in his life. One path led toward responsibility. The other led toward entitlement. Right now, he probably didn't even realize that choice existed. But after Thursday night, he would. Because Thursday night was when I planned to show him something he never expected. Something that would force him to confront the real cost of what he had done. Not in anger, not in humiliation, but in truth. And the center of that truth was still waiting quietly inside the vault. The same watch Ryan thought had vanished forever. The same watch David had asked me to protect. And the moment Ryan saw it again, his entire understanding of the past 3 weeks was going to change. Thursday evening arrived faster than I expected. By the time I pulled into the restaurant parking lot, the sky was already turning that soft orange color California sunsets are famous for. The place Ryan had chosen was a trendy Italian restaurant near the marina. Expensive, lively, the kind of place Ashley liked. Through the glass windows, I could already see them inside. Ashley sat facing the entrance, scrolling through her phone while Ryan talked to the waiter. She looked relaxed, stylish as always, dressed in a white blazer that probably cost more than my first car. Ryan spotted me first. His face lit up, and he stood immediately. Mom? He wrapped me in a hug when I reached the table. For a moment, I let myself feel it. The familiarity. The warmth of my son's arms. It reminded me of the boy he used to be, the one who ran into my arms after school when he was little, excited to tell me about his day. But when the hug ended, reality returned just as quickly. Ashley stood next and kissed my cheek lightly. Karen, it's so good to see you. You too, I said politely. We sat down and the waiter poured water while Ryan began describing their trip before we even opened the menus. Europe was incredible, he said. Honestly, one of the best experiences we've ever had. Ashley nodded eagerly. Paris was magical, and the Amalfi Coast absolutely breathtaking. She pulled out her phone and began showing me photos. I recognized most of them already from social media, but I nodded and smiled as if I were seeing them for the first time. This was our hotel in Positano, she said, swiping across the screen. Another photo appeared Ashley leaning against a balcony railing with the ocean behind her. And this one was dinner in Santorini, Ryan added. He pointed at a picture of a candlelit table overlooking the cliffs. The food was unbelievable. I listened quietly as they talked. For nearly 20 minutes, the conversation revolved entirely around their vacation. Wine tastings, boat rides, sunsets. Ryan laughed as he described getting lost in the streets of Paris. Ashley talked about how much she loved the shopping in Italy. Not once did either of them mention the watch. Finally, after the waiter brought our appetizers, Ashley leaned forward with a bright smile. We brought you something. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small gift bag, a little souvenir. I accepted it with a polite thank you and opened the bag. Inside was a silk scarf. Beautiful. Elegant. But as I held it in my hands, the irony was impossible to ignore. A souvenir from a trip funded by David's watch. Ryan watched my reaction carefully. You like it? It's lovely, I said. Ashley smiled. We thought of you when we saw it. For a moment, silence settled over the table. Then Ryan asked the question I had been waiting for. How have things been here? Quiet, I said. Work going well. Yes. Ashley took a sip of wine. We actually thought about you during the trip, she said. Oh, in Santorini, she explained. The sunset reminded us of something David would have loved. Ryan nodded in agreement. He always liked views like that. There it was again. That strange, almost accidental reference to David. I studied Ryan's face carefully. Was there guilt there? Regret? But if there was, it was buried deep beneath his calm expression. I set my fork down gently. "Speaking of David," I said. Ryan looked up. "Yes, I've been looking for something lately." Ashley's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Oh, yes," I said, "David's watch." For the first time that evening, both of them froze. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but I saw it. Ryan reached for his glass of water. "The Patek Philippe?" he asked casually. "Yes." Ashley forced a small laugh. "Didn't you keep that in the safe?" "I did." Ryan frowned slightly. "You can't find it." "No." A brief silence followed. Ryan exchanged a quick glance with Ashley. Then he shrugged lightly. "That's strange." Ashley nodded. "Maybe you moved it somewhere and forgot." I held Ryan's gaze. "That's possible." Ryan relaxed a little. But I noticed the tension in Ashley's shoulders. She reached for her wine again. "Well," she said brightly, "at least it wasn't stolen." "True," I replied calmly. The conversation drifted to other topics after that. Work, friends, Ryan's plans for the next few months. But beneath the surface, the tension remained. Because even though neither of them said it out loud, we all knew the truth. They knew exactly where the watch had gone, and they believed I didn't. By the time dessert arrived, Ryan seemed fully relaxed again. Ashley was laughing as she described a street performer they had seen in Rome, but inside I was waiting for the right moment. When the waiter cleared the table and brought the check, Ryan reached for it immediately. "My treat," he said. "That's generous," I replied. Ashley smiled proudly. Ryan paid the bill without hesitation. $80,000 had clearly given them confidence. As we stood to leave the restaurant, Ryan placed a hand on my shoulder. "We should do this again soon," he said. "I'd like that." Ashley gave me another quick hug. "Next time we'll cook dinner for you." "That sounds nice." We walked outside together into the cool evening air. The marina lights reflected across the dark water nearby. Ryan looked relaxed, happy, satisfied with how the evening had gone. And that's when I spoke again. "Ryan." He turned toward me. "Yes, I'd like you to come by the pawn shop tomorrow." His eyebrows lifted. "The pawn shop?" "Yes." "Why?" I smiled gently. "There's something there I think you should see." Ryan looked confused. Ashley looked curious, but neither of them seemed worried, because neither of them had the slightest idea what was waiting behind the vault door. And tomorrow? They were finally going to find out. The next morning, I arrived at the pawn shop before Ryan. Daniel was already there, finishing his usual morning routine, checking inventory, reviewing the previous day's reports, and preparing the display cases before customers started arriving. When he saw me step inside, he gave a small nod. "Today's the day." "Yes," I said. "You nervous?" I thought about the question for a moment. "No," I replied honestly, "just ready." Daniel understood what that meant. We walked into the back office together where the secure vault stood quietly against the wall. The heavy steel door looked exactly the same as it had every day for years, but this morning it felt different. Today it held more than just a valuable watch. It held the truth Ryan had been avoiding. Daniel leaned against the desk. "What time is he coming?" 10. He glanced at the clock. "You've got about 15 minutes. We didn't talk much after that. There wasn't really anything left to say. At exactly 10 o'clock, the front door opened. I heard Ryan's voice greeting the employee at the counter. "Hi, I'm looking for Karen Martinez." A moment later, he appeared in the doorway of the office. He looked slightly out of place in the pawn shop environment. Ryan was dressed neatly, as always, dark jeans, a button-down shirt, expensive shoes. For a brief second, his eyes moved around the room, taking in the shelves, the office desk, the vault. "Mom," he said, still sounding puzzled. "What's going on?" "Come in," I said gently. Ryan stepped inside. Daniel stood up and extended his hand. "Ryan, good to see you again." Ryan shook it politely. "You too." Then Ryan looked back at me. "You never told me you spent time here." "I didn't," I said. He frowned slightly. "So why did you want me to come?" I gestured toward the chair across from the desk. "Sit down." Ryan hesitated, but eventually sat. There was a strange tension in the room now. Ryan clearly felt it, though he didn't yet understand why. Daniel remained quiet. I folded my hands on the desk. "Ryan, do you remember the last time you came to this shop?" His expression changed almost instantly. It was subtle, but the recognition was there. "What do you mean?" he asked. 3 weeks ago." Ryan's eyes flickered briefly toward Daniel, then back to me. I might have stopped by," he said carefully. "With Ashley." His jaw tightened slightly. "Yeah, to sell something." Ryan shifted in his chair. "Mom, what's this about?" Instead of answering directly, I reached for the folder on the desk. the same folder Daniel had shown me earlier that week. I opened it and slid a document across the table. Ryan looked down. For a second, his brain seemed to struggle to process what he was seeing. Then his eyes widened. It was the pawn receipt. His signature was clearly printed at the bottom. Ryan Martinez, seller. Ryan looked up slowly. Where did you get this? I held his gaze. From the store records. His confusion deepened. Why would you have access to their records? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I stood up. Ryan watched me carefully as I walked toward the vault. Behind me, I heard Daniel quietly close the office door. The soft click of the latch sounded louder than usual. Ryan shifted in his chair again. Mom, what's happening? I stopped in front of the vault and turned the combination lock. The metal mechanism clicked softly as it opened. Then I pulled the door wide. Inside, the trays of valuables sat neatly arranged. I reached in and lifted the tray that held the watch. Ryan stood up halfway out of his chair. What are you? His voice stopped, because the moment I turned around, he saw it. The Patek Philippe, his father's watch, resting in my hand. Ryan's face went completely pale. That's, he whispered. Yes, I said calmly. The watch you sold. For a few seconds, Ryan couldn't speak. His eyes moved between the watch and the pawn receipt on the desk. Then slowly the realization began to form. He looked around the room again. At the office. At the vault. At Daniel. Then finally back at me. You work here, he asked. I shook my head slightly. No. Ryan's brow furrowed. Then how? I own it. The words hung in the air. Ryan blinked. I'm sorry, what? This shop, I said. And the other 6 locations across Southern California. Silence filled the room. Ryan stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. You're the owner. Yes. That's not possible. It is. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, trying to process everything. You never told me. That's true. But why? Because your father and I believed money complicates family relationships. Ryan laughed nervously. Well, that's one way to prove it. He looked again at the watch in my hand. So you're telling me? His voice trailed off. Yes, I said. The pawn shop you and Ashley walked into that morning, Ryan swallowed hard, was yours. The full weight of the situation finally settled over him. For 3 weeks, Ryan had believed the watch was gone, that it had disappeared into someone else's collection, that the transaction was finished. But now he understood. Every moment of that sale had happened inside my business, under my control. Ryan sank back into the chair slowly. I didn't know, he said quietly. I know. You saw everything. Yes. The cameras? Yes. Ryan covered his face with both hands for a moment. When he lowered them, his eyes were filled with something new. Not confusion, not fear. Something closer to shame. I didn't think it, he began. I know, I said again. The room fell silent. The watch rested in my hand, ticking softly. Each second marking the moment Ryan finally realized the truth. The watch had never left our family, but the lesson he was about to learn was only just beginning. For a long moment after the truth came out, Ryan didn't say anything. He just sat there in the chair, staring at the watch in my hand like it had suddenly become something dangerous. The silence in the room was thick, not angry, heavy. Finally, Ryan spoke again. You saw everything. His voice sounded quieter, now stripped of the confidence he had carried into the shop just minutes earlier. Yes, I said calmly. The cameras recorded the entire transaction. Ryan closed his eyes briefly. And you didn't stop it. No. That made him look up. You could have. Yes. Then why didn't you? It was a fair question. Daniel remained silent in the corner of the office, understanding that this moment belonged to Ryan and me. I walked back to the desk and placed the watch gently on the table between us. Because I wanted to see something, I said. Ryan frowned slightly. What? The truth. He looked confused. What truth? I leaned forward slightly. Whether selling your father's watch meant anything to you. Ryan's jaw tightened. Mom, let me finish. He stopped talking. When you and Ashley brought the watch into this store, I continued. I watched the cameras. I heard everything you said. Ryan looked down at the desk. His fingers tightened against the edge of the chair. You called it old family junk. Ryan flinched. That was Ashley. And you said it was better to turn it into something useful. He swallowed hard. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse him. I simply spoke the truth. You negotiated the price, I said. You signed the receipt, and then you walked out smiling. Ryan stared at the floor. The office was silent except for the faint ticking of the watch. Finally, he whispered, I didn't think it mattered that much. The words hit harder than anything else he had said. I nodded slowly. That's exactly what I wanted to understand. Ryan looked up again. What do you mean? You didn't see the watch as your father's memory. He opened his mouth to respond, but stopped, because deep down he knew it was true. You saw it as money, I said. Ryan's shoulders sank slightly. I guess, yeah, there it was. The honesty that had been missing until now. Ryan rubbed his hands together nervously. I thought you barely looked at it anymore, he said. I didn't want to remind you of Dad. That wasn't your decision to make, I replied gently. Ryan winced. The truth had a way of doing that. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Ryan glanced at the watch again. How much did you pay us? $80,000. He nodded slowly. Ashley had been thrilled about that number. It had funded their entire trip. Ryan leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling. We spent most of it, he admitted. I assumed you would. Paris hotels weren't cheap. I know. He let out a quiet laugh. God, this is embarrassing. I studied his face carefully. For the first time since this whole situation began, Ryan didn't look defensive. He looked small. Not like the confident man posting photos from Santorini, like the son who realized he had made a mistake. Why didn't you tell me you owned the pawn shops? He asked after a moment. Your father and I agreed to keep it private. Ryan shook his head slowly. All these years. Yes. You trusted me to eventually take over the business. That was the idea. Ryan blinked. You mean inherit it? Yes. The weight of that word settled heavily between us. Ryan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I guess I really messed that up. Ryan. He looked up. I'm not here to punish you. You're not? No. He glanced at the watch again. Then why show me this? I tapped the watch lightly with my finger. Because this represents more than money. Ryan nodded slowly. Dad said something about that once. What did he say? Ryan thought for a moment. He said a watch carries the time someone lived. I felt a small ache in my chest. That sounds like your father. Ryan stared at the watch again. I didn't think about that when we sold it. I know. I was thinking about the trip. I know. Ryan exhaled deeply. Ashley had been talking about Europe for years, and you wanted to give her that. Yes. That part isn't wrong. Ryan looked surprised. It isn't. No. He frowned. Then what is wrong? I met his eyes. You chose the easiest thing to sacrifice. Ryan didn't respond, but I could see the realization slowly forming behind his eyes. There were other ways to plan that trip. Save money. Wait longer. Travel modestly. But instead he had taken something irreplaceable, because it was convenient. Ryan sat silently for several seconds. Then he asked quietly, Are you angry? I considered the question carefully. No, I said. Disappointed. A little. Ryan nodded. That's fair. He reached out slowly and touched the watch on the desk. I remember Dad wearing this. So do I. He turned it over, studying the engraving on the back. Time built together. Ryan's voice softened. I forgot about this. I never did. Ryan placed the watch back down. I wish I had thought about that before selling it. I watched him carefully. Do you? Yes. Why? Ryan hesitated. Then he answered honestly. Because seeing it here makes the trip feel different. How so? He struggled to explain. It was amazing, he said, but now all I can think about is where the money came from. The truth had finally caught up with him. Ryan rubbed his face with both hands. What happens now, he asked. That depends on you. He looked confused. What do you mean? I picked up the pawn receipt and slid it toward him. You made a decision that day. Ryan nodded slowly. Yes. Now you need to decide what kind of man you want to be after it. Ryan stared at the paper. The same document that had seemed like a simple transaction a few weeks ago. Now it looked very different. Because now he understood the real cost. And the next decision he made would determine whether that cost became a permanent scar or the beginning of something better. Ryan remained silent for a long time after I said that. The pawn receipt sat on the desk between us, the paper that once represented a simple sale, now carrying a completely different weight. He stared at it like it had suddenly become something far more complicated than a financial transaction. Finally, he looked up. What kind of decision are we talking about? His voice was steady but softer than before. Responsibility, I said. Ryan frowned slightly. I don't understand. You sold something that belonged to your father, I explained calmly, and you turned it into a vacation. Ryan nodded slowly. Yes, that decision already happened. I can't change it, and neither can you. He rubbed the back of his neck. So what happens now? That's the part you control. Ryan leaned back in the chair, thinking. Daniel remained quiet across the room, letting the moment unfold without interruption. Ryan's eyes moved to the watch again. "I wish I could undo it," he said quietly. "That's not how life works." "I know." For several seconds, Ryan simply stared at the watch. Then he said something that surprised me. "I want to buy it back." The words hung in the air. Daniel raised an eyebrow slightly, but didn't speak. I watched Ryan carefully. "You mean repay the $80,000? "Yes. And how exactly do you plan to do that?" Ryan hesitated. "Well, Ashley and I could start saving." "That might take a while," I said. "I know." "How long?" Ryan thought about it. "Maybe a couple of years." "That assumes you stop spending the way you have been." Ryan winced slightly. "Yeah." I reached into the folder on the desk and pulled out another document. Ryan looked down at it. "What's that?" "A summary of your financial situation." His eyes widened slightly. "You checked my finances." "Yes." He looked embarrassed. "Then you know. I know you've been living far beyond your income." Ryan exhaled slowly. "Ashley likes nice things. And you like giving them to her." "Yes. But that lifestyle comes with a cost." Ryan nodded. "I see that now." "Do you—" "Yes." "How—" Ryan hesitated. Then he answered honestly. "Because when I saw the watch today, I realized the trip didn't actually solve anything." "What do you mean?" Ryan leaned forward slightly. "We're still in debt." "That's true. And selling the watch just delayed dealing with that." "Yes." Ryan looked down at his hands. I didn't want to admit that before. The honesty in his voice felt different from anything he had said earlier. Less defensive, more reflective. "That's a good start," I said. Ryan looked up. "So, if I pay back the $80,000, can I have the watch?" I shook my head gently. Ryan blinked. "No." "Why not?" "Because that's not how this works." Ryan frowned. "I don't understand. The watch isn't something you buy back." "Then what is it?" "It's something you earn the right to protect." Ryan sat back again, processing that. "Protect?" "Yes, like a family heirloom." Ryan looked at the engraving again. "Time built together." "Yes." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Ryan asked quietly, "Do you think Dad would be disappointed in me?" The question hung heavily in the air. I took a moment before answering. "I think your father believed people could learn from their mistakes." Ryan nodded slowly. "That sounds like him." "But he also believed actions matter more than words." Ryan exhaled deeply. "So apologizing isn't enough?" "No." "What would be enough?" "That depends on the kind of man you choose to become." Ryan stared at the watch again. For the first time since this whole situation began, his focus didn't seem to be on the money. It was on the meaning behind the object. "That watch meant something to him," Ryan said quietly. "Yes." "And to you?" "Yes." Ryan nodded slowly. I should have remembered that. "Yes." He sat there thinking for several more seconds. Then he asked, "What would you have done if you were me?" "That's not the right question." "Why not?" "Because you're not me." Ryan sighed. "Fair point." Another quiet moment passed. Finally, Ryan stood up from the chair. "I want to fix this," he said. "How?" "I'm going to start by fixing my finances." "That would be wise." "I'll sell the Mercedes." "That would help." Ryan nodded. "And Ashley and I will cut back on spending." "Good. And when I've paid off our debt," he looked at the watch again. "Then maybe I'll be the kind of person who deserves to hold that again." I studied him carefully. "Maybe." Ryan looked relieved by that answer. "Not guaranteed, but possible." He picked up the pawn receipt from the desk and folded it carefully. "Can I keep this?" he asked. "Yes." "Why?" "Because it's a reminder." Ryan slipped the paper into his pocket. "Of the worst financial decision I ever made." I smiled slightly. "Or the most important one?" Ryan looked puzzled. "Important." "Yes." "Why?" "Because it forced you to see something you were avoiding." Ryan thought about that. "Yeah," he admitted. "Sometimes people only grow when they face uncomfortable truths." Ryan nodded slowly. "I guess today was one of those days." "Yes." He glanced at Daniel. "Sorry for putting you in the middle of all this." Daniel shrugged lightly. "I've seen worse." Ryan laughed quietly. "I'm sure you have." Then he turned back to me. "Thanks for telling me the truth." "You're welcome." "And thanks for not yelling." "I didn't need to." Ryan smiled faintly. "No, you didn't." He looked at the watch one last time. "I'll earn that back someday." "We'll see." Ryan nodded. Then he walked toward the door. Before leaving the office, he turned back briefly. "Mom." "Yes, I really am sorry." This time the apology felt different. Not rushed, not defensive. Real. "I know," I said. And as Ryan walked out of the pawn shop that morning, something had clearly shifted. The watch still rested safely in the vault. but the lesson it carried had finally begun to take hold. And sometimes, that's far more valuable than any amount of money. After Ryan left the pawn shop that morning, the office felt unusually quiet. Daniel closed the door behind him and leaned against the desk. "Well," he said after a moment, "that went better than I expected." I nodded slowly. "Yes, you didn't go easy on him." "No, but you didn't destroy him either." "That wasn't the goal." Daniel folded his arms thoughtfully. "You were testing him." I gave a small smile. "You figured that out already." He nodded. "I've been in this business long enough to recognize when someone is being given a second chance." I walked over to the vault again and opened it. The Patek Philippe sat exactly where we had left it. I picked it up and studied it for a moment. The watch looked the same as it always had, but the meaning around it had changed. Daniel watched quietly. "You think he'll actually change?" he asked. "I don't know yet." "You're giving him the opportunity." "Yes." Daniel nodded slowly. "That's more than most people would do." But the truth was, this situation wasn't finished yet. Because Ryan wasn't the only person involved. Ashley had been part of the decision to sell the watch, and so far she had heard none of this conversation. That reality became clear 2 hours later when my phone rang. Ashley's name appeared on the screen. I answered calmly. "Hello, Ashley." Her voice sounded tense. "Karen, Ryan just told me what happened." I assumed he would. There was a pause. "You own the pawn shop?" "Yes." "All of them?" "Yes." Another silence followed. I could almost hear her mind racing on the other end of the line. "Why didn't anyone tell us?" "That was your father-in-law's decision." Ashley exhaled sharply. "This is unbelievable." "In what way?" "You watched us sell the watch and said nothing." "That's correct." Ashley's voice rose slightly. "You let us spend that money." "Yes." "Karen, that's not fair." I remained calm. Fairness wasn't the issue. Then what was? Understanding. Ashley sounded frustrated. "You could have just told us it was your store." "Yes, and then we wouldn't have sold it." "Exactly." There was another pause. Ashley's tone softened slightly. "Ryan feels terrible." "I know. He says you want him to fix things." "That's his decision." "Well, he's talking about selling the car and cutting expenses." "Yes." Ashley let out a long breath. "That's extreme." "Is it? It's just a watch." I didn't respond right away. Ashley continued. "We use the money for something meaningful. A vacation." "Yes." "Do you believe that was worth your father-in-law's watch?" Ashley hesitated. "Well, yes." Her honesty surprised me, not because she said it, but because she said it without hesitation. "That's your perspective," I said. "And yours." "My perspective is that some things represent more than money." Ashley sighed. "I know you're sentimental about David. He was my husband." "I get that. Do you—" Ashley didn't answer immediately. Finally, she said, "Ryan's taking this really hard." "That might be a good thing." "Why?" "Because growth usually begins with discomfort." Ashley sounded skeptical. "You think this is some kind of lesson?" "Yes. And you're okay watching your son struggle financially because of it." "I'm okay watching him become responsible." Ashley didn't like that answer. "You could help him." "I already have." "How?" "By telling him the truth." Ashley laughed bitterly. "That's not help." "It is if he learns from it." Another long silence followed. Finally, Ashley asked, "What happens to the watch now?" "It stays where it belongs." "With you?" "Yes." Ashley sounded frustrated again. "So Ryan just has to live with this mistake forever?" "No." "What do you mean?" "He has the opportunity to change. And if he does, then the watch becomes his responsibility one day." Ashley paused. "You mean he inherits it?" "Perhaps." "That's a big perhaps." "Yes." Ashley seemed to be processing that information. "Ryan really loves you," she said quietly. "I know. And he respects you." "I hope so." Ashley sighed again. "I didn't think selling the watch would matter that much." "I believe you." "But it clearly did." "Yes." Ashley's voice softened slightly. "I'll talk to Ryan tonight." "About what?" "About slowing down our spending." "That would be wise." Another brief silence passed. Then Ashley said something unexpected. "Karen, do you think David would forgive us?" The question caught me off guard. For the first time in the conversation, Ashley sounded uncertain. "David believed people could grow," I said gently. "So that's a yes." "It's an opportunity." Ashley seemed to accept that. "Well, we'll see what happens." "Yes," I said, "we will." After the call ended, I sat quietly in the office for several minutes. Daniel returned from the front counter and noticed the thoughtful look on my face. "Ashley," he guessed. "Yes." "How'd that go?" "She's still deciding how she feels." Daniel chuckled. "That sounds about right." But she asked an interesting question. What was that? She asked if David would forgive them. Daniel nodded slowly. And I told her forgiveness depends on growth. That's fair. I placed the watch back inside the vault. As the heavy door closed again, I realized something important. Ryan's lesson had begun, but Ashley's lesson was only just starting. And the way she responded in the coming months would determine whether this family grew stronger, or whether the crack that had formed would eventually break something far more valuable than a watch. The weeks after Ryan's visit to the pawn shop were quieter than I expected. For the first time in a long while, Ryan didn't call me about dinner plans or weekend visits. At first I wondered if he was avoiding me, still embarrassed by everything that had happened. But a few days later, I received a message from him. Asterisk sold the Mercedes today. That was it. No explanation. No drama. Just a simple statement. I read the message twice before responding. Asterisk. That must have been difficult. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. Asterisk it was, but it needed to happen. I could almost hear David's voice in that answer. Ryan had loved that car. It was one of the first big purchases he made after his promotion a few years earlier. Ashley had posted pictures of it constantly when they first bought it. Selling it couldn't have been easy. And that told me something important. Ryan wasn't just talking about responsibility. He was acting on it. 2 weeks later, he called again. Hey, Mom. His voice sounded tired but steady. How are you? I asked. Busy. With work. And finances, he admitted with a small laugh. That's part of adulthood. No kidding. There was a pause before Ryan continued. I paid off one of the credit cards. That's good. It felt weird. Weird. Yeah, he said. I realized I've been carrying that balance for almost 3 years. That didn't surprise me. Credit card debt had become dangerously normal for a lot of people. But the important part was that Ryan had finally noticed. I should have dealt with it sooner, he said. Most people don't until they have to. Ryan sighed. I guess selling the watch forced me to look at things. That's what I hoped. Another short pause followed. Then Ryan asked, Have you worn the watch lately? The question caught me slightly off guard. No, I said. Why not? It was never really mine to wear. Ryan was quiet for a moment. Dad always wore it, he said. Yes. I remember the sound it made when he set it on the nightstand. That made me smile softly. You noticed that? Yeah, Ryan said. It had this soft ticking sound. David loved that sound. Ryan chuckled lightly. He said it reminded him that time was still moving forward. That sounds exactly like him. The conversation drifted to other things after that. Ryan's work, a new project he was managing, and a few updates about friends we both knew. But the difference in Ryan's tone was noticeable. Less arrogance, less distraction, more focus. 3 weeks later, Ryan came by the pawn shop again. This time he arrived without being asked. Daniel greeted him at the front counter while I finished a call in the back office. When Ryan stepped inside, he looked slightly different. Not physically, but the way he carried himself. He seemed calmer, more grounded. Hi, Mom, he said when I stepped out of the office. Hello, Ryan. He glanced around the shop for a moment. I wanted to show you something. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small folder. Inside were several documents. Loan statements, he explained. I skimmed through them quickly. 2 credit cards paid off. 1 personal loan reduced significantly. And the car loan, gone. You sold the Mercedes, I said. Ryan nodded. And bought something smaller. That makes sense. Turns out I don't actually need a luxury car to get to work. I smiled faintly. That's a valuable discovery. Ryan laughed. Yeah. Daniel walked past us carrying a tray of watches, but paused briefly. Looks like someone's making progress. Ryan nodded respectfully. Daniel gave him a small approving nod before continuing toward the front of the store. Ryan turned back to me. Ashley's adjusting too. Oh! She wasn't thrilled at first. I imagine not. But she's starting to understand. Ryan hesitated. She asked about the watch last night. What did you tell her? That it's safe. That's true. Ryan looked toward the vault across the room. I don't expect to get it back anytime soon. That's not the point. I know. He folded the financial papers and placed them back in the folder. I just wanted you to see that I'm trying. I see that. Ryan nodded. Then he said something that surprised me. I think selling the watch might have been the best mistake I ever made. I raised an eyebrow slightly. Why? Because it forced me to grow up. I studied his face carefully. There was no sarcasm there, just quiet honesty. Ryan continued. Eerie? For years, Ashley and I kept chasing the next thing, bigger trips, nicer restaurants, better cars. And now I'm starting to realize none of that matters if you're drowning in debt. That realization had taken a long time to reach, but hearing him say it felt like a small victory. Ryan glanced at the vault again. Dad used to say, time teaches you things if you pay attention. Yes, I said softly. He did. Ryan smiled. Oh. I guess the watch did its job after all. Maybe it had, because the lesson that watch carried had finally reached the person who needed it most. Ryan looked at me again. Thank you. For what? For letting me figure it out instead of just fixing everything. That's what parents eventually have to do. Ryan nodded slowly. Then he headed toward the door. Dinner this weekend, he asked. I'd like that. Good. As he stepped outside, I watched him walk across the parking lot. The same son, but not quite the same man. Because sometimes growth doesn't come from success. Sometimes it comes from the moment you realize you made a mistake and choose to become better because of it. And for the first time since the watch disappeared from my safe, I finally believed Ryan might become the kind of man David always hoped he would be. 6 months passed. Life slowly settled into a new rhythm. Ryan kept his promise. Every few weeks, he sent me small updates not to impress me, but simply to share his progress. Another credit card paid off. A savings account started. A promotion at work that came with more responsibility but not necessarily more luxury. And perhaps the biggest change of all, Ryan and Ashley stopped chasing the kind of lifestyle that had once defined them. The expensive restaurants became occasional treats instead of weekly habits. Vacations turned into simple weekend trips instead of extravagant international adventures. Ashley even started a small business selling handmade jewelry online, something she had once talked about for years, but never actually pursued. When Ryan told me that part, I smiled. Sometimes the best ideas only surface when people stop trying to impress others and start focusing on what actually matters. One quiet afternoon in early spring, Ryan came by the pawn shop again. By now his visits had become normal. Daniel greeted him like an old friend at the front counter. Back again, Daniel asked. Ryan laughed. I'm starting to like this place. Daniel grinned. That's good. Most people only come here when they're desperate. Ryan shook his head. Well, I'm here voluntarily. He walked into the back office where I was reviewing inventory reports. Hi, Mom. Hello, Ryan. He sat down across from my desk. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Ryan reached into his bag and placed something on the table. A thick envelope. What's this? I asked. Ryan slid it toward me. Open it. Inside were several documents. Bank statements, loan payoff confirmations, savings account records. I scanned through them quickly. Ryan had eliminated nearly all of his debt, and for the first time in years, he had real savings. I looked up at him. That's impressive. Ryan smiled slightly. It took discipline. Yes, it did. And a lot of uncomfortable conversations with Ashley. I'm sure. Ryan leaned back in the chair. But we figured something out. What's that? Life actually feels calmer when you're not constantly trying to afford things you don't need. That realization alone meant he had come a long way. Ryan glanced toward the vault again. You probably know why I brought those papers. Yes, he nodded. I'm not asking for the watch. That's good. Ryan smiled. I'm just showing you that I understand what you meant. Which part? The responsibility part. Ryan stood up slowly and walked over to the vault. He rested his hand on the steel door for a moment. I used to think inheritance meant ownership, he said quietly. And now I think it means stewardship. The word surprised me slightly, but it was exactly the right one. Ryan turned back toward me. Dad didn't build everything so I could sell pieces of it whenever I wanted. No, he built it so it could last. Yes, Ryan nodded. That took me a while to understand. I stood and walked over to the vault. For a moment, Ryan looked uncertain. Mom, I didn't answer. Instead, I entered the combination and opened the heavy door. The familiar trays of watches and jewelry sat inside. I reached for the tray that held the Patek Philippe. Ryan's eyes widened slightly as I lifted it out. The watch gleamed under the office lights just as it had the day Ryan first saw it here. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I placed the tray on the desk. Ryan stared at the watch quietly. I haven't seen it since that day. I know. He leaned closer, studying the engraving again. Time built together. Yes. Ryan didn't reach for it. He simply looked, and that told me everything I needed to know. Go ahead, I said. Ryan hesitated. Are you sure? Yes. He picked up the watch carefully. The way he held it was completely different from the first time he had seen it in this office. Back then, it had been an object tied to money. Now it was something far more meaningful. Ryan turned the watch over slowly. I wish Dad could see this moment. I think he would understand it. Ryan nodded. Then he placed the watch gently back on the tray. I'm not ready to take it yet. I raised an eyebrow. No. Not yet. Why? Ryan smiled softly. Because right now I'm still learning how to protect what matters. Those words felt exactly right. So I closed the tray and slid it back into the vault. The watch returned to its quiet place inside. But this time something had changed. Ryan hadn't asked for it. He hadn't demanded it. He had simply acknowledged its meaning. And that meant he was finally ready for the role David had always hoped he would grow into. As the vault door closed, Ryan turned toward me. Thanks for giving me the chance to figure it out. You earned that chance. Ryan smiled. I guess the watch was never really about time. No, he said thoughtfully. It was about what you do with the time you're given. I felt a small warmth in my chest hearing him say that, because those were words David would have agreed with. Ryan headed toward the door. I'll see you Sunday for dinner. Of course. He paused at the doorway and looked back one last time. Mom, yes. I'm glad you didn't stop us from selling the watch that day. I tilted my head slightly. Why? Ryan smiled. Because if you had, I probably never would have learned any of this. Then he walked out into the afternoon sunlight. And for the first time since the safe had been opened, that quiet Tuesday morning months ago, I felt completely certain that David's watch was exactly where it belonged, not just in the vault, but in the future of someone who finally understood its value. Sometimes the most valuable things in our lives aren't the ones with the highest price tags. They're the things that carry our memories, our sacrifices, and the time we shared with the people we loved. Ryan didn't just sell a watch. He sold a piece of his father's story. At the time, he thought he was trading something unused for a better experience, a luxury vacation, a few weeks of excitement, a collection of beautiful photographs. But what he learned was something much deeper. Money can buy experiences. It can buy travel, comfort, and convenience. But it cannot replace meaning. The watch wasn't valuable because of the brand engraved on its face. It was valuable because it represented 35 years of work, love, and partnership between two people who built a life together. And sometimes, the hardest lessons in life come from realizing that we didn't understand something until it was almost gone. The truth is, every family carries objects like that. Maybe it's a watch. Maybe it's a piece of jewelry, a photograph, or even an old house. But behind those objects are stories. And protecting those stories is what keeps our families connected across generations. Ryan eventually learned that inheritance isn't about owning something. It's about protecting what came before you so the next generation can understand it too. And sometimes, the greatest act of love a parent can give their child is the chance to learn that lesson for themselves. If this story made you think about your own family, I'd really love to hear your perspective. Have you ever had something passed down to you that carried emotional meaning, not just financial value? What would you have done if you were in Ryan's position? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy emotional family stories like this one, don't forget to ** like the video and subscribe to the channel ** so you don't miss the next story. Also tell me ** where you're watching from and what time it is there. **. I always love seeing how far these stories travel around the world. Thank you for spending this time with me. And remember, sometimes the most important things we inherit aren't objects. They're the lessons hidden inside them.